Our speaker is someone we love to have come back to Westmont as many times as we can get him. And this morning I'm particularly grateful that Father Greg Boyle is here because he has to go right from here back to Los Angeles to a luncheon in his honor, or where he'll be honored. And he's very modest about this. I asked him what the honor was for, and he was sufficiently ambiguous and humble. And so anyway, he's being honored in Los Angeles, and he'll have to leave it just very quickly after he's done. So just know that if you wanted to talk to him, it's just because he can't. He's got to head back to L.A. with his driver Gus. So thank you for coming up here. It's a long drive. Father Greg Boyle. Gosh, some of you weren't even listening to what I said. I could hear y'all chattering that you missed all that good stuff. Father Greg Boyle is an ordained Jesuit priest and the head of a ministry to gangs in Los Angeles, the Homeboy Ministries, that is one of the best and most admired and effective works of its kind in the U.S. What I love about Greg is he combines a lot of great qualities. He has a pastor's heart for people. And his people are unusual, and they're in places that many of us have never been. He has a poet's skill. His major is English, and he's just a great storyteller. So anyway, I'm just glad whenever we can get Greg Boyle to be here. Greg, we welcome you to Westmont College again, and we hope it's again and again and again in the name of Christ. Let's welcome Greg Boyle.
Thank you very much, Ben. It's always a privilege to be with you. I've been on the road for this past week, so I haven't been home, so I haven't even been in the office today. So I'm anxious to get back after all this stuff you were talking about. And because it's a joyous place at Homeboy Industries. It's huge. Thousands of people go through there all the time. And homies, for as much as they have to carry all the time, they're always there with news, good news. I remember once I came in and there was a homie named Lupe waiting to see me, and the Gus at the reception desk said, Lupe's been waiting for like 3 days to tell you something. And so I see him, he gives me a big abrazo, and he says, while you were gone, my son was born. I say, wow, nice going, congratulations. When was he born? On his birthday. I said, wow, what are the chances of that happening, and Homeboy Industries stands for something. It announces a message in the world. It says, what if we were to invest in people rather than seek to incarcerate our way out of this problem? But if I may be so bold to tell you what I think Westmont College is about, you are not being prepared for the real world. You're being prepared to challenge it. For the opposite of the real world is not the unreal world. The opposite of the real world is, in fact, the kingdom of God. How do we create a community of kinship such that God, in fact, might recognize it? And so to that end, all of us in this gym are called to imagine a circle of compassion, and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle. We recognize that our God is compassionate, loving kindness, and all we're asked to do is to be in the world who God is. But the question for us as we challenge the real world is to ask, is there room in our compassion for everybody? And so we seek to say yes, and we stand at the very margins and the edges with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless. We stand with those whose dignity has been denied. We stand with those whose burdens are more than they can bear. When you're really fortunate and lucky, you get to stand with the easily despised and the readily left out, and with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop, and with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. Brace yourself as you attempt to do this and to challenge the real world, because people will accuse you of wasting your time. But the prophet Jeremiah writes, in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. And so we choose to make those voices heard. For 25 years, I've worked with gang members. I've had to bury 174 human beings killed because of this sadness. And so in my church community, we sought to do something. I sort of agree with St. Francis, preach the gospel always. When necessary, use words. But that's not the preferred way. We're being invited to live as though the truth were true and to imagine something different so that people can watch it and observe it and embrace it. But anything of value I've learned from the homies in the last 25 years, and I'm certainly grateful to them because they teach me all the time. But lately they've been teaching me how to text, and I'm so grateful to them. I don't know what we did before it sure beats the heck out of actually talking to people. And I'm pretty good at it, you know, LOL and OMG and BTW, and the homies have taught me a new one, OHN, which apparently stands for, oh, hell no. And I've been using that one quite a bit lately, and so there I am with two homies, Manuel and Poncho, and we're driving to Palm Desert to give a talk at a high school. And they're older vatos. They've been to prison and tattooed and do a variety of things. And we're driving, and Manuel's in the front seat, and all of a sudden, zzz, incoming, a text. And he reads it, and he chuckles. And I say, what is it? Oh, he goes, it's dumb. It's Snoopy back at the office. Well, I just saw Snoopy, 15 minutes earlier. He greeted me in the morning as the day began at Homeboy. And Snoopy and Manuel work in the clock-in room. They clock in hundreds and hundreds of rival enemy gang members who work at Homeboy. And I said, well, what's it say? Oh, it's stupid. Hang on a second. Hey, dog, it's me, Snoops. Yeah, they got my ass locked up at county jail. They're charging me with being the ugliest vato in America. You have to come down right now, show them they got the wrong guy. Well, we died laughing, the three of us, and then I realized that Manuel and Snoopy are enemies. They're from rival gangs. They used to shoot bullets at each other. Now they shoot text messages. And there's a word for that, and the word is kinship. Where there is no us and them, there's just us. Is there room in our compassion for everybody? Jesus, that was the wallpaper of his soul, was compassion. That's exactly who he was. He didn't talk much about it. He showed you exactly what it looked like in hopes that you would imitate it. And so we choose to be in this world who God is. And helpful to that is Alice Miller, the late great child psychologist, who calls us to be enlightened witnesses, people who through your kindness and tenderness and focused, attentive love return people to themselves. You don't hold the bar up and ask anybody to measure up. You just show up and you hold the mirror up and you tell people the truth, knowing that your truth is my truth and my truth is a gang member's truth. And it's all the same truth, and here's the truth. You are exactly what God had in mind when God made you. And then you watch people on the margins become this truth. You watch them inhabit this truth, and no bullet can pierce it. No 4 prison walls can keep it out, and death can't touch it because it's huge. But you have to dismantle messages of shame and disgrace that get in the way, and that's sort of key. I'm in 25 different detention facilities where I say mass Catholic services in all the probation camps, juvenile halls, youth authorities. And usually on a Saturday, I will do 2 masses in Las Afueras in the boonies, and then I race back to Dolores Mission because I have so many, things. I've been there for 25 years, and the homies asked me to do stuff. So my Saturday always looks sort of the same. 1 o'clock baptism, and 2 o'clock quinceañera when a girl turns 15. At 3 o'clock wedding, 4 o'clock exorcism. Just checking to see if you're still listening to me. I've never done one of those. But anyway, so I raced home one day, and it's 20 minutes to 1, and I thought, well, I'm going to go to my office, and I'm going to go through my mail all by myself. So I go there, and there I am, contento, feliz. When all of a sudden a woman barges into my office, I find out her name is Lisa. She's 34 years old. This is the first time she's ever stepped foot in my office. Oh, everybody knows her. They've seen her around. She's kind of a famous street person, prostitute, heroin addict, gang member, tattooed, felon. She's something of a famous peleonera and a gritona. She's always fighting. She's always screaming. You can hear her scream as she gets tossed out daily from the bar next door. You can hear her scream into a payphone on First Street, "Just let me stay tonight," pleading with family members and friends. And this is the first moment she's ever stepped foot in my office. And now it's 7 minutes to 1. She comes in, she plunks herself down, she launches right in. "I need help. Ooh, I've been to like 50 rehabs. I'm known all over, nationwide. Went to Catholic schools all my life," she says. "Graduated from elementary, graduated from Sacred Heart High School in Lincoln Heights." And then she gets quiet and still. And she says, "In fact, first time I ever used heroin was right after I graduated. And I've been trying to stop since the moment I began." And I watched as she leaned her head against the wall behind her, and her eyes became like two ponds, water rising to meet its edges and spilling over. And she cried, until finally she leveled her eyes at me, and she said with great deliberation, "I am a disgrace." And suddenly, her shame meets mine, because when I had seen her step into my office that afternoon, I had mistaken her for an interruption. We're in this together. Kinship, only kinship. The measure of our compassion lies not in our service of those on the margins, but only in our willingness to see ourselves in kinship with them. For we do not seek a compassion. The compassion of Jesus is the one we seek, the one that can stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. At Homeboy Industries, it's about concrete help. Jesus wouldn't want it any other way. In fact, if it's not about concrete help, he's not interested. It's a place where attachment gets repaired and people get restored and healed. It's a place where they discover the truth of who they are and redefine themselves. And so we have businesses, Homeboy Bakery, Homeboy Silkscreen, Homeboy Homegirl Merchandise, solar panel installation training program. Our salsas and chips are in 256 Ralph stores all over Southern California. So leave no salsa behind. And Homegirl Cafe, where women with records, young ladies from rival gangs, waitresses with attitude will gladly take your order. Some months ago, we had Diane Keaton showed up for lunch, the Oscar-winning actress from Annie Hall. She won an Oscar in all the Godfather movies. She shows up with a guy who's there once a week. And her waitress this day is Glenda. And Glenda's a homegirl, been there, done that, tattooed, been to prison, parolee. She doesn't know who Diane Keaton is. So she's taking her order, and Diane Keaton says, "What do you recommend?" And Glenda rattles off the 3 platillos that are her favorites. And Diane Keaton says, "I'll take that second one. That sounds good." And then suddenly something dawns on Glenda. She looks at Diane Keaton. She says, "Wait a minute. I feel like I know you, like we've met somewhere." And Diane Keaton, deflects it humbly. "Oh gosh, I don't know. I suppose I have one of those faces that people think they've seen before." And then Glenda goes, "No, now I know. We were locked up together." That just took my breath away when I heard it. And I don't believe we've had any further Diane Keaton sightings since that moment. But suddenly kinship so quickly, Oscar-winning actress, attitudinal waitress, exactly what God had in mind. In fact, exactly what is on God's mind is this. Jesus says it clearly, that you may be one. That you may be one. He could have said a whole lot of other things that were self-referential, but he doesn't. He just says that you be one. It's about us. One of the great privileges of my life was knowing Cesar Chavez, and he was a friend. And I remember once a reporter said to him, "Wow, these farm workers, they sure love you." And he shrugged and he smiled and he said, "It's mutual. It's about mutuality. For no kinship, no justice. No kinship, no peace. No matter how singularly focused you might be on those worthy goals, they can't happen unless we're one." Mother Teresa, I think, diagnosed the world's ills correctly when she suggested the problem in the world is that we've just forgotten that we belong to each other. So how do we stand against forgetting that? Long lay the world in sin and error pining till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. And those words are familiar, and yes, they're about Jesus. But how can they not be really meant for you, your job description in the world, as you challenge the real world? You appear, and the soul feels its worth. There was a homie who resisted just about all my efforts to help him. I would be on my bike in the housing projects at night, and I'd see this guy Bandit, and he'd be running up to cars selling crack cocaine, and then he'd be counting his money as he walked away from the car, and then he'd see me. "How about a real job?" "Well, I'm okay, G, thanks, though." Very polite. Until one day, 15 years ago, Bandit shows up in my office, and I couldn't believe my eyes. And he says what gang members often say, "I'm tired of being tired." So I walked Bandit to a job developer, and as luck would have it, they locate an unskilled, low-pay, first kind of job in a warehouse. Now cut to today, 15 years later. Bandit is the head of the whole place. Runs the whole shooting match. He's the supervisor of all supervisors. He owns his own home. He's married and has 3 kids. Well, I hadn't heard from him in a couple years, and no news is usually good news with homies. And so he calls me, though, on a Friday afternoon, kind of breathless and panicky. "Gee, you got to bless my daughter." "¿Qué pasó, mijo? Is she sick? Is she in the hospital?" "Oh, no. No, on Sunday she's going to Humboldt College." Imagine, my oldest. She's going to college. But she's a little chaparrita, and we're kind of afraid for her, because that's far, that's way up north. "Do you think you could give her a blessing before she leaves?" I said, "Sure, are you kidding? I'd be honored. Look, tomorrow is Saturday. I have an exorcism at 1. Come at 12:30. And sure enough, they all show up, the whole family. And I situate little Jessica in front of the altar, and I said, "Let's surround her with our bodies and our love, and everybody connect to her, touch her, put your hands on her, on her shoulders, on her head." And I say, bow your heads and close your eyes. And as the homies say, I do a long-ass prayer. I go on, and somewhere in the middle of this prayer, I notice that we've all become chillones. We're all crying. I don't know why we're crying, except for the fact that Bandit and his wife don't know anybody who's ever gone to college except me. Certainly nobody in their families. So we wipe our tears, and I kind of laugh at how mushy we got, and I look at Jessica. "So, what are you going to study at Humboldt College?" She was very, very fast and quick. "Forensic psychology." I go, "Damn, forensic psychology." And Bandit chimes in, "Yeah, she wants to study the criminal mind." And Jessica, very deadpan, turns at her father and does one of these, And he sees her and he gets the joke and he says, "Yeah, I'm going to be her first subject." So we walk outside and we give big abrazos and they all pile in the car, but Bandit hangs back, and I said, "Hey, can I tell you something? I give you credit for choosing to walk in your own footsteps. I'm proud of you. And his eyes fill up with tears, and he says, ¿Sabes qué? I'm proud of myself. All my life, people called me a lowlife, a bueno para nada, a good for nothing. I guess I showed them. I said, yeah, I guess you did. And the soul feels its worth. In the early days, years ago, in our first office, a bunch of kids coming home to the projects from middle school and elementary school. They'd all come in, and one of the kids was a kid named Betito. And Betito was a little 12-year-old kid who English was not his first language, but he always insisted on speaking English with me, even though he'd operate without benefit of a net sometimes. And he loved to find these expressions that he'd hear on TV, you know, a Pollo Loco commercial, and then he'd try them out on me. Hey, G, you know what you are? I go, what? You're the real deal at $1.99, you know. And he was a precocious kid. I remember he came in once. He said, hey, G, kick me down with 20 bones, yeah? I want to take my lady to the movies. I go, my God, your lady? How old are you? 12. 12? How old is your lady? 16. I go, 16? He goes, yeah, but she's short. Here's $20. Have a good time. Well, one Sunday night, Monday was a holiday or something. Kids were playing, and Beto was out there with his cousin. And there were two gang members standing in front of a dumpster smoking cigarettes. And a van slowly came in. And two guys are in the van with their faces covered, and they roll down the windows, and they begin to shoot. And one of the gang members in front of the dumpster falls. Every man, woman, and child in the projects knows that if you hear shooting, you start running. But for some reason, Beto didn't run. He didn't move. And because he didn't, a very large bullet entered his side and traveled through what they call a through and through. Later, a friend of mine who was the doctor in the ER said the caliber was so high and it was such a large bullet that the sheer reverberation of it traveling through his body had rendered Betito paralyzed, though it didn't touch his spine. I race to the hospital and I keep vigil with his grandmother. And he survives a 4-hour surgery. But an hour into his recovery in the ICU, I watched through the window as nurses and doctors run in and pound on his chest and plead and bargain with his heart. And it just won't cooperate. And he died. Now, Beto was 12 years old, and he was the real deal. But so were the two in that van that evening. And is there room in our compassion to include all of them? And so Jesus asks us that because he always had room. He excluded nobody. And so we imagine a circle of compassion, and we imagine nobody standing outside that circle. And the real world doesn't want that circle to expand, but the kingdom of God insists that it does. For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. Make those voices heard. And God bless you.